Hey everybody, my video showing how I made this roller display will begin in a few minutes.
Dispatcher, we're signing out and going to be 4012 out.
Union Pacific 4012. Do you read me? Over.
Roger that. Union Pacific 4012. I read you. Over.
Start up and stand by. Over.
Okay, let's get to work. Out. This is Union Pacific 4012, made up and waiting on a clear track. Can I move? Over.
Negative 4012. Hold your position. Over.
Yes, sir. Holding for a signal. 4012 out. Tower, 4012. Still have a stop signal. What's the plan? Can we move? Over.
Yes, 4012. You may proceed. Over.
Copy that. We have a clear signal. 4012 out. Roger. 4012 out.
All right, here is how I made my roller display stand. The whole reason behind this is I have always loved the big boy locomotive, but I never could run one because my layout has the proper curves for it, but it would hit the trees and tunnels and everything else as it went around the track because of the articulated length of this thing and how the nose and the cab juts out. You can see my layout on my YouTube channel if you wanted to see it. So I never had the dream to have a big boy. However, recently I joined an O-scale model train club. And as I was helping them set up the other week, I realized I could run a big boy on that layout. It's 18 feet by 42 feet with the proper curves and the proper clearance. And I finally thought, all right, I could run a big boy on that. So that was my intention. I ended up finding one, and that will be running on the club layout. However, I also wanted to be able to run it at home. This takes 0.72 diameter curves at a minimum, and I really didn't want to go get all that track, lay it out on the floor for a while, run it for a while, put it all back away. I wanted something that I could just enjoy seeing the engine by itself run. I had seen roller test stands on YouTube, and I thought I could make myself a roller test stand that's more of a display stand, and then I could set this up real quick whenever I want to, put the engine on it, play with it, run it, listen to it, and when I'm done I simply unwire it and put it in a corner. So this is why I went with this display stand. The boards are poplar. They're a 1x4 poplar. I went poplar over pine. Pine is softer. It would warp easier. Poplar is a little more dense, less tendency to warp. Oak would have been even better. In hindsight, I probably should have done this with oak because this went together very simply and very well. And I'll probably end up redoing it in oak anyway. But for the time being, after I get this all assembled, I am going to paint the wood either dark gray or black, and I'll have my stand. The reason I went with fast track over Gargraves is Gargraves I would see through this, and I really wanted to have this all covered up to where all you see is track. From a distance and from eye level, all you really see is track. Gargraves worked, or not the Gargraves, the fast track worked out beautifully for that, and it has a continuous center rail that I'll tell you why it's important for me in a minute when I flip this thing over. I did some practice on a test piece of track, made sure I could do this, made my cuts, and when I cut through this thing, yes, I cut all that outside rail away. So my sections now from here to here and to here and here to here, there's no longer a rail connecting it. So that's why I did what I did with the wiring underneath. All right, the rollers are from Micromark, and there's the part number for the O-gauge roller. And a lot of guys online are recommending these. They're working very, very well. I set this up with a little bit of movement. This one is not fixed, but I have it really snug. I can move it if I need to, but the engine's electric motor is here. The first set of drive wheels with traction tires is here, and then it goes down from here. So I'm glad this one is super firm because this is the one that once it's moving, gets all the rest of them moving. And again, all these are free to go. The whole bottom track, I have it to where there's also side-to-side movement. So again, the train's going to self-center itself. And that has been working out really well for me. So let me flip this over. And all I did was I got two separate 1x4 pines, and they're 1x4, but they're actually 3/4 of an inch by 3.5 inches. And the 3/4 of an inch is important because the Micromark rollers are designed to work with a 3/4 inch piece of whatever material you're going to use. The Micromark rollers come in a set of 4. And again, a lot of guys are using them. And when you buy a set of 4 Micromark rollers, one of them comes with this brass on the center rail. And it goes through the screw in the bottom, and the bottom contact picks up from the center rail, and then the top of it conducts to one of the rollers on your locomotive. On this Lionel Visionline Big Boy, the locomotive itself has 4 pickup rollers. The tender has 2 more. I didn't want to run this thing off of 1 pickup roller. I know it's probably overkill, but that is just me. So I took this off. I'm not using this. And again, one of the reasons I went with the Gargraves track is because I now have the full center rail with power on it. And all of the 4 rollers on the engine and the 2 rollers on the tender are all getting power. That was my choice. And again, I've got slots cut in here, so this is free to have some side-to-side movement. I've got slots cut here and here because when I finally put this together, I'm going to mount the... Sorry about that, my air compressor kicked in. So when I go back, when I mount this, I need to draw this down. The flex track has an arch to it by nature, and I want to pull it down. I want to snug it down. So I'm going to snug it down with the screw holes that are here. They're going to go here, and that will also still give me some of that side-to-side flexibility that I want to have this nice and loose. All right, on my setup for a wiring, the electricity from down here, again, the rollers themselves pick up from the outside rails only. This is an insulated piece, but I would like to tie both together. So I've got my wire soldered from here to here, and that comes up to a tab on the upper level track. So I have outside rail ground going to both rails all the way across. And I did use one solid piece of fast track, and I cut it so I don't have any kind of fluctuation or any change in there. I have ground solid to all four rollers on both sides pick up the ground, conduct it to the wheel, so the engine has wonderful ground. When a lot of guys are doing the soldering on here, some guys are soldering wires onto the tabs, some guys are using lock-ons or stake-ons, and I was always concerned that they were attaching the soldering iron just a tiny little bit, hardly getting the tabs hot at all. And I understand soldering, and I was concerned about having cold solder joints. So, but I knew you couldn't hold it on there too long or you're going to start melting the plastic. So I took my scrap test piece and I soldered onto a tab, and that baby is on there. I am real happy with the connection, with the mechanical connection and the electrical connection. So I went ahead and soldered. What I do, I use this thing a lot. It's a metal finishing pad. I cut off a little piece off the bottom, and I burnished every contact I was going to solder. I just rub it and clean it up, get it a little roughed up, get any coatings off it, any plating off of it. Then I went with 18 gauge wire because the wire coming out of my Lionel Powerhouse 180 is 18 gauge wire. So I had this in the house, so I went with 18 gauge wire. I'm just coming in the board in the back and go on up into my fast track, and my ground outside rail comes in. Again, I tinned the wire with, and then I tinned also the pad below. You put flux on it and then get them warm, put a piece of solder on it, get it flowing. So both parts were tinned. I cut away the insulation for just that one section and then held it, soldered it. And before I let go of the soldering iron, I hold it in place with a screwdriver, remove the soldering iron, and hold it, let it cool. And then I drilled holes through the fast track, and I came down to the other rail. Yes, they have one crossover bar that connects both outer rails together, but in the fast track section, the cross rail bar is here, and this is cut away from here, and this is cut away from here, so that doesn't do me any good. So again, one of them is fine. I wanted every single outer rail tied together. So in this 10-inch section, which is the back piece, I tie into this outer rail here, I tie into this outer rail, and then I go into the 30-inch piece of fast track. And in the 30-inch piece of fast track, I tied into this outer rail, crossed over, tied into this outer rail, went straight down the center, keep it out of the way. It's not hitting the rollers. And then I went to both outside rails for the front truck because the front truck does have a light on it, and I want to make sure the front truck had ground. So that's my wiring. This ties both outer rails into up here, and that's all together. When I was initially going to do this, the back of my board, I had another 3/4 of an inch on there, and I had planned on running a banana post terminal because I thought I could have the banana post standing upright in the middle of the board, have the track wires connected straight to it, and then whenever I wanted to run, I would modify this banana plug cable and just cut and solder my wires onto it, and I would just insert the banana plug real quick and easy and put it all together. But I decided I just wanted to have one piece of wire coming out, so I kept the 3/4 inch overlap on it, and that's really there just to give this a little bit of protection in case I ever stood it up on end. And what I decided to do to try to keep the wire flush to the bottom is I clamped 2 boards together and then just drilled at the bottom part of one board and then just started angling it up, and that got my wire up in place. And that seems to be, that's working very well. Let me go back to the rollers because I don't think I mentioned this. The rollers have a little bit of movement, and that's what you want, but when you get these, and again, thanks to the guys with the videos online, I watched quite a few of them, and especially the gentleman laid off sick who does a lot of weathering. He actually runs the wheels so he can get the weathering on right. He mentioned that these are by nature very, very loose in the track. You can do this. So he suggests adding 6/32 nuts to these. And when he does it, I think he's using Gargrave's track. These outer rails, these outer sides of the flats fall right in place and everything's nice. These were so thick, they would not fit in my track. I had to grind them down. The screws that are holding this into the insulated part go through the insulated part into the metal, and the metal is threaded. So once you tighten those screws down, you can't tighten anymore. So what I had to do is mark the outer part that I wanted to cut. I put marks on what is this side up, so I remember that. And then I ground these off on my bench grinder one by one. I ground one off, I came back, I put it on, I snugged it up, and I put it back on the exact same stud that I was on. And again, before I started, I did snug them out so I had flat sides where I wanted to. And that worked very, very well for me because I couldn't even get them on the track before, and now they're nice and snug. So that's my wiring. I think that's everything that I wanted to mention. I will get this painted up, and I'm sorry it's hard to do this one-handed, but it does lay down nice, and my wire is hitting at the moment. And again, you can see there is an arc to the Lionel Fast Track. I don't know if you can see it, but I can push it down. And another beauty of these Micromark rollers is they have the height set just perfectly for using it on 3/4 inch material like a board. When I snug these down and pull this down, you can see how much the rail goes down from the roller. When I screw these down, here's a driving wheel. This is a set of driving wheels. This is the other set of driving wheels. The other two wheels are just free rolling in here. When I snug these down, the free running wheels that aren't grabbing anything, they don't even hit the rail. I was thinking I'm going to have to dimple this one here and here for the 4 wheels, but I don't even have to dimple them because this pulls down so tight that it clears. You don't see it, it's there. It's just, they did a beautiful job with these rollers from Micromark. Very happy with it. I'll get this painted, get everything screwed down, and you'll have seen the results of that at the beginning of this video. All right, so here it is, all finished. I'm very happy with it. I decided to go ahead and stain the wood instead of painting it and put a few coats of polyurethane on it. I'm very happy with that. as again I mentioned, I'm very thrilled with how the rollers worked out. Once an engine is sitting on there, you won't even be able to see that they're there. Few things that I want to point out. Underneath this section where the other piece of track is that the rollers are resting on, all I did was take another piece of this track and I cut this off on both sides. I cut the angles off, and that give me a shorter width that would fit down inside, that I still had enough room that I could hide everything with a piece of wood, and that was cut out and everything sits back down inside. Real happy with the screws I found to mount these. There are wood trim screws, and if you can see the head on it, it's a different style of head. It fits very nicely into the factory hole. Here's a factory hole, and then here's one I drilled and then countersunk, so it's nice and snug. I snugged these down as I talked about earlier I was going to, and came across and drilled new holes at the end. As I mentioned, I'm happy with how the wire exits, and I've got the wire marked with a little red heat shrink so I know which is positive, which is the center rail. Measured out resistance of all of my outside rails, and everything is now directly tied to each other to ground, so all of the outside rails, every roller, all the outside rails, they're all tied together. The center rail is tied together from here, and that gives me one solid continuous feed, so all 4 of my rollers on my locomotive are getting power, and both wheels, both pickup rollers on the tender are also getting power. Very happy with it. As I said, when I drew this down, when you'll see when the train is running, the height of the rollers is actually a tiny bit higher than the height of the rail. So that means the two wheels that don't have lips on them, that are strictly rolling along, they're not going to hit, and all the weight will be on the 4 drivers, and they all have a nice solid ground. So again, very happy with it. If you have any questions, by all means, ask away. Thanks for watching.